Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Tina Walia and I will be your host today. This evening, we are excited to bring to you the latest webinar in our Empowering Women Embracing Hope series titled Alone but Not Lonely. Our guest speaker, Dr. Natasha Sharma, will guide us in seeking paths towards leading a fulfilled life where loneliness is not an issue. In addition to the great presentation tonight, we have raffle prizes, three $50 Amazon e-gift cards up for grabs for our webinar attendees. So please stay with us right until the end in order to be eligible to win. Now, without further ado, let's get started. The Ripple Effect Wellness Organization, also known as TREVO, is a registered Canadian charity founded by Dr. Sudhi Devanesan and Mr. Ravi Juneja in 2009. Our mission is to create healthy communities through knowledge sharing, online and through talks, seminars, workshops, and other events. The Ripple Effect Wellness Organization supports various local and international organizations working in the field of healthcare by hosting fundraisers like the annual gala and golf tournament throughout the year. We strongly believe that knowledge is the best preventative medicine one can have. The Women's Outreach Wing of the Ripple Effect Wellness Organization has been serving women and the community for the past 5 years. Our mission is empowering women through education. We do this by inviting, inspiring, and motivating speakers at our live events and webinars, and empowering and educating our audience on topics that contribute to the overall wellness of women, their families, and communities. Dr. Sudhi Devanesan, or Dr. D, as he's affectionately referred to by his patients and friends, is the co-founder and president of the Ripple Effect Wellness Organization. Dr. D is a family medicine physician, educator, and public health activist. He was inducted as a member of the Order of Canada in 2001 for his role in inner city health and prevention of heart disease among South Asians. He has also been the chief of Department of Family and Community Medicine at St. Michael's Hospital. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Sudhi Devanesan.
Thank you very much, Tina, for that lovely introduction. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this last webinar of the year, put together with a lot of effort and a lot of planning. So I do thank the Women's Outreach Wing of the Ripple Effect Wellness Organization for putting this together for us this evening. And I'm glad that we have an outstanding speaker as well, Dr. Natasha Sharma, because loneliness, I see it in my practice, and it has been classified now as a high risk factor for illness and even death in certain age groups. So it's an important emotion that all of us have experienced at some time or the other, but particularly during this pandemic. And therefore, I'm so happy that we have this opportunity from TREVO to bring you this enlightening talk tonight on the effects of loneliness. This has been a difficult year for all of us. It's been challenging, it's been sad, it's been uplifting, it's been inspiring, it's been many, many things to many different people. And the important parts of this pandemic have touched our lives in many different ways, and loneliness is one of them. I want to congratulate our executive team for the amount of work that they have put in this year, for the time they have spent putting together many, many programs despite the challenges of the pandemic. Our Women's Outreach Wing have put on these amazing seminars. Mr. Sridhar Rao and Dr. Asha Devanesan have really put a whole lot of work into making our website an excellent one. And I do invite you to go there and have a look at it. There's a lot of good information. And our youth have had a campaign, masks and other important elements in terms of prevention of COVID. And our youth leaders, Simar and Karan, along with David Innes, had a poster campaign, both in English and in Punjabi, that went out to the community. We also had a fundraising campaign, and which was headed by Mr. Narendra Pal. And I have to say that we had a very successful fundraising campaign this year. We collected money for the Great Valley Hospital, and as well as for roofs for the roofless. We kept our promises and gave them the money for PPEs and to run the senior center. And then, of course, our Women's Outreach Wing. Again, many of you have witnessed their work in the community, as well as the educational and empowering of women and embracing hope. So it's been a good year, and we look forward to next year with exuberance and hope and joy and anticipation. And as it is a tradition, I want to end my speech with a short story that may resonate with some of you. This story is about a very humble insect, the caterpillar. The caterpillar crawls on its belly and is very vulnerable to insects, to humans stamping them out, to birds that eat them. So the caterpillar is a very scared creature. So soon it discovers that it cannot live this kind of an existence on Earth as a caterpillar. So in its fear, it decides to change and transform. So what does it do? It hides in the dark by spinning a cocoon around it. And in that darkness, there is enlightenment. The caterpillar discovers that it cannot survive in this world being so vulnerable, so afraid, so anxious. So in the dark, it transforms itself into a beautiful creature called a butterfly. And when it breaks out of the darkness into the light, it spreads its wings and it flies, and it has freedom. It has the finest nectar from the flowers, and nobody kills caterpillars. End of story. But butterflies are preserved, they are admired, they're strong. And so that same caterpillar, which was afraid and was in danger of being killed, is now alive, free to fly. And that is the end of my story. Thank you for your attention. And I'll pass this back on to you, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sudhi, for continuing with the tradition and sharing this wonderful story of yours tonight. Before we commence the presentation, I would like to remind the audience about the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So please submit your questions through the Q&A chat box at the bottom of the screen. Dr. Natasha Sharma is a leading international authority on the science of happiness, relationships, and parenting. A well-known TV and media personality, she's the author of the Kindness Journal and the 8-Hour Therapist. She's devoted to inspiring and helping others master their emotional fitness, become emotionally robust, and live their most fulfilling and happiest lives. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Natasha Sharma.
Thank you, Tina. I'm just going to share my screen with you all. And okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to speak on this topic. It's one that's very near and dear to my heart, and I have spoken not just professionally, but even personally at great length about this this other problem, this other, not a pandemic, I would say an epidemic, because loneliness is not the same kind of problem that it is in other parts of the world as it is in our modern Western society. And when I go through my presentation, I'm going to talk about, what are the major risk factors and causes for, first, what loneliness is and why it has been on the rise, not just for the past 10, 15 years, but the past quarter of a century, it has steadily been on the rise. And it's been in the last 5 to 10 years where we have seen some of the most significant increases in loneliness in individuals. So I'm just going to move to my next slide here and share this short piece of prose or poetry. I wrote this about a few years ago now, and I'll just read it to you. We are all born into this world alone. It takes others for us to be lonely. Now, this is the paradox of loneliness. It takes others for us to be lonely. Why? How can it take others? Well, this is why. Let's talk about alone, what alone means versus lonely. And maybe some of you are already familiar with this. But here you see this picture of a woman who is arguably alone. She's sitting on the edge of a dock at the water's edge, and she's alone. Currently, I'm in my room and I'm alone. And many of you might be alone watching this webinar. Alone just means that there is nobody else around you in the vicinity. You are alone physically, functionally. It can also be used to describe feeling as though you're the only person going through a particular experience, like no one can understand what you're going through because you might be the first or exceptional or the only person. So that is what alone refers to when we use it. Lonely is something else. Loneliness is very much a matter of perception. So alone is fact and functional. Loneliness is very subjective experience based on the perception of the quality of our relationships. Okay, I'll repeat that. Loneliness is the perception of the quality of our personal relationships, how satisfied we are in our lives with our personal relationships, the people that we are connected to, if we feel connected at all. And so using this definition, this is how we need others in order to even create such a perception. It requires other people. But the other thing to note is that loneliness has nothing to do with the number of people in your life. Nothing at all. You could be in a marriage that is 15 years long, 5 years long, 25 years long, and feel lonely. You could have a dozen friends who you could call up at any moment and go out with or connect with or phone or Zoom or whatever, and you could still feel lonely. On the converse, you could have very few people in your life and not feel lonely at all. You could have maybe one or two close friends, or just maybe, your spouse, or maybe some people, some colleagues, what have you, and not feel lonely. So it is very much independent of the number of people in your life, the number of contacts you have on your internet, email, social media. It's the perception of how satisfied you are in those relationships. And that has to do with some external factors, and it has to do with some things to do with ourselves. Of course, perception is created by ourselves. So in this slide, I just want to talk about the fact that why this is so important and why loneliness has become such a major topic in the field of not just wellness, emotional health, and mental health, but just in general all over, is because we have real life knowledge of the negative impact that loneliness, we can strongly correlate the negative impacts that loneliness has. And the reason that there are negative impacts is that we all, biologically, we, since the beginning of our existence, have had a natural and very strong drive for connection. That hasn't changed. So I have often said that human beings haven't changed that much in general, if you look at sort of the span of time in which we've been on this planet. But the world around us has changed like crazy. And where we are now in terms of the world and how it works and everything that's changed in it since, you know, the very beginning, it's maddening. It's absolutely astonishing how much of a gap that there is between us as humans and the world that we live in, how big that gap has widened. So our need for connection to others is a very basic drive. We are born with this drive. We are social beings. We have that desire for connection, approval from others, and there's good reason for that. It's protective, not only functionally, if we have people that we can rely on, if we slip and fall, if we have an accident, if we're in danger, if there's a threat, we have people who can help us and jump in, but also biologically. So when we have those, there's benefits mentally and even physical health, like your increased immunity even has been correlated to having strong connections. So the evolutionary aspect of this is clear and hasn't changed at all. So if I go to the next slide, then what is going on in our world? Why is loneliness on the rise? Well, one reason, simple off the top of the head, is that we're talking about it, first of all. We're thinking about it, we're looking at it, we're examining it, we're defining it. Anything you put a spotlight on, you're obviously going to pay more attention to, and you're going to see more of it just because of that attunement. But I'd like to digress for a second and read you a very short story, and then talk about why loneliness is on the rise. A woman came out of her house and saw 3 old men with long beards sitting in front of her yard. She did not recognize them. She said, "I don't think I know you, but you must be hungry. Please come in and have something to eat." They asked, "Is the man of the house home?" She replied, "No, he is out." They said, "Then we cannot come in." In the evening, this may not be the most up to date in the gender factor. In the evening, when her husband came home, she told him what had happened. "Go tell them I am home and invite them in." The woman went out and invited the men in. "We do not go into the house together," they replied. "Why is that?" she asked. One of the old men explained. "His name is Wealth," he said, pointing to one of his friends. And pointing to the other, "He is Success, and I am Love." Then he added, "Now go in and discuss amongst yourselves which one of us you want in the home." So the woman went in and told her husband what was said. He said, overjoyed, "How nice," he said. "Since that is the case, let us invite Wealth. Let him come in and fill our home with wealth." His wife disagreed. "My dear, why don't we invite Success?" Their daughter was listening from the other corner of the house, and she jumped in with her own suggestion. "Would it not be better to invite Love? Our home will be filled with love. Let us heed our daughter's advice," said the husband and wife. "Go out and invite Love to be our guest." So the woman went out and asked the 3 men, "Which one of you is Love? Please come in and be our guest." Love got up and started walking towards the house. Then the other 2 also got up and followed him. Surprised, the lady asked Wealth and Success, "I only invited Love. Why are you coming in?" And they replied together, "If you had invited Wealth or Success, then the other 2 of us would have stayed out. But since you invited Love, wherever he goes, we go with him." I just really like that story. Maybe it's a little outdated in the sense of the women thing, but I really like the story because it is quite true. And one of the biggest reasons, if not the single biggest reason, that loneliness is on the rise and has been steady and is becoming a worldwide problem, and most significantly here, is because of the way in which we live our lives. Our modern world and our modern lifestyle values things that are not conducive to this natural drive we have for connection. We have evolved to a culture, again, particularly here, that places great value and emphasis on wealth, achievement, fame, riches, and conventional success. And we have come so far away from the value of community and friendship and relationships and investing and putting time and effort into those things. This wasn't always the case. This is very much something that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 decades since we really experienced the industrialized revolution and now the technology revolution. So this lifestyle and the way that we've created it isn't one that actually values a society that values connection. And this is emphasized by our inability to provide balance and work-life balance, and the ability for people, like creating an environment and a space where people actually have the time and bandwidth to invest in others, spend time with them, and nurture those relationships. And 2, there just isn't any real there's this almost I call it the busyness badge. And it's become a symbol of honor. And if it's honorable to be busy and constantly on the go and constantly doing things and constantly achieving, then the converse is true. Like whether you realize it or not, subconsciously, we are devaluing those social connections. So this is one of the biggest reasons that loneliness is on the rise. I also want to read you something very short from, and I want to make sure I cite it correctly. In the 1930s, Harvard University began the longest study on human happiness. They invited 19-year-old sophomores from Harvard and teenagers from the poorest neighborhoods of Boston to participate. And for 75 years, okay, this is one of the longest research studies in human history. For 75 years, they did interviews, tests, and checked up on these individuals every 2 years to see how they were doing. And what they found is that when young people especially, are asked, what do you want in this world? What do you think will make you happy? What do you think the answer is? Fame and rich. I want to be rich, I want to be famous. Now, don't get me wrong, we all need to live, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying abundance and comforts of life. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a cashmere sweater, nothing at all. But if it costs you your mental health and your relationships to purchase that cashmere sweater, that's a problem. So what they found is that it's actually our social connections that are the most important for our well-being. First, having connections is better for our health, and conversely, loneliness kills. It won't kill you right away, obviously. It's the slow burn that happens with that decreased immunity, that increased risk by not having people to call on, and just that feeling and just the things that maybe we don't even know about that happen that over time can create not just mental and emotional illness, but physical illness. Second, having higher quality close connections is more important for our well-being than the number of connections. And I spoke about that a little bit earlier on. I have said to people in my career that if you have just one person in this world, just one, that's actually all you need. One person who you could say anything to. You could tell them your deepest, darkest secret, the thing that you can't think about if you were to lock eyes with yourself in the mirror over, then you're in a good spot. Just one person. Most people, I shouldn't say most, but too many people cannot say that they have just a single person in their life who they can rely on. If you have more than one, great, even better. But even one is protective and enough. Third, having good relationships is not only good for our bodies, but it is good for our brains. Okay, so what are we going to do about this? How are we going to deal with this situation, given that we are not always in control of the factors around us? Many of us have gone through so many changes and adjustments over these past 2 years that we feel even less in control than we did previous to 2020. And we don't have control necessarily fully over, first of all, if other people will be in have the space and time to connect with us. We don't have the space and we don't have the control over whether our employers or the places that we work will require us to work this schedule or that schedule. But we do have some control, and we do have the ability to set boundaries and put focus on things in our life if only we put that purposeful attention and intention to it. So I want to talk about this first step towards really how are we going to, how do you manage this loneliness, and how are you going to be a person who feels, who can take control over this perception of their loneliness if you're struggling with it. Be connection centric in your relationships. What does connection mean? What does it really mean to connect with someone? We use this word all the time, Thanks for connecting. Nice to connect, LinkedIn, so nice to connect with you. No one's connecting on LinkedIn, right? Like no one is connecting on social media and Facebook and Instagram. I'm sorry, but they're not. Okay, there might be some connections. If there's connections that happen, they may start there, but they turn into, what happens is when the feeling of connection happens, it happens because they stay in contact, they eventually meet in person, and something more lasting develops out of it. So connection is, the way I define it, the ability not only to have, it's not about having things in common with people, it's the ability to feel a sense of safety in another person's presence and the safety to feel vulnerable with them. And the very famous Brene Brown talks a lot about this. Vulnerability is the doorway to, well, actually, I don't know if she said this might be my words, but vulnerability is the doorway to connection. And we can't be vulnerable with everybody. We're only going to select a very small handful of people in this world to be vulnerable with. But we have to bring that wall down in ourselves. We have to, at some point, bare the soul, be able to show those parts of us that we are less than proud of, show those parts of us that we accept but we know are challenging, and show those parts of us that render us in our minds weak, but they don't actually. And that is where connection happens. And when you have someone on the other side who accepts you as you are, who doesn't require you to change, and of course you like each other and enjoy each other's company and have things in common, that is connection. Be connection centric in your relationships. Focus on quality, not quantity. You do not need 200 friends or likes on Instagram. The second part, or the second key concept I want to talk about, is being creative. So this is connection to an entity that is not a person, is kind of how I describe it. So creativity, or being creative, is, this is my definition, it is to something either exists where it didn't exist before, or is fundamentally altered, changed, or innovated upon as a direct result of your presence. Okay, so either you built something, planted something, changed something, wrote something, edited something, painted something, sang something. I mean, there's multiple ways in which we can be creative. It's not just about playing an instrument or drawing a beautiful portrait. The reason creativity is so important in terms of loneliness is because it's another form of connection. When we are creatively immersed, we feel alive. And the reason for that is you can't really be anywhere else. If you're doing something creative that requires that focus, where you're building, modifying, changing, editing, planting, putting together, whatever it is, you can really only be immersed in the here and now. And so what you're doing is you're connecting to the present moment. And this, believe it or not, in my view, is very much something that is an antidote to loneliness. So we're talking about connecting not only to people, but connecting to something outside of people as well. Step 3 is measuring ourselves through gains, not gaps. So now we're talking about the connection with the self. So number 1 was connection to others. Number 2 is connection to a passion or something outside of the self. And step 3 is connection to the self. And how do you connect to the self? By valuing yourself, by believing yourself, by knowing that you were worthy the day you were born. You were enough the day you were born. You might not be enough for everybody else. Okay, that's fine. No one else in the world can give you unconditional love. And they won't, and they shouldn't, because relationships always have conditions. We can't just run roughshod on anybody. But with ourselves, we always have the ability to provide ourselves unconditional love. And when we do that, we create this very strong sense of self-value and self-worth. And that is connection to the self. One of the things that we do, especially is very prevalent in our society, is that we measure ourselves against our ideals, right? So that ideal is either some vision we have of ourselves in the future, or like something that we're always striving towards. Okay, so I got that promotion. Well, when I get this one, then I'll really be happy. So now I've already created that gap. I'm here, but I really want to be here. That's my ideal. And I measure my self-worth by this gap between where I am and where I want to be. And either where you want to be is created by yourself, or it's created by, and this is a special problem in our world today, looking at what other people are doing, which we can now do 24/7, and which can be completely disproportionately blown up and exaggerated via social media and the internet. So we have fallen into this pattern of measuring ourselves in this gap, where we are and where we want to be. And this is literally the recipe for self-devaluation and unhappiness. Versus if we can step back and measure the other way, how far have I come? Well, hang on a second, wait a second, just hold on. Here I am striving for the next thing. I'm thinking about the next goal. I'm thinking, and then I'll be happy. Then when I climb that peak, I'll be happy. Where was I last year? Why don't I think about that for a second? Where was I a year before that? And this is this old adage about, the only race you're running is the one you run against yourself. But it is so true. If you can measure yourself, if you can look past through your past life, not every moment is a shining one. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting we all don't have things that we maybe would not regret, mistakes we've made, things that we have done that we are less than proud of. However, almost everyone, I'm convinced, is able to track progress in their life and growth and resilience and achievements. And when we place the focus and shift it onto that and the gains that we have made and how far we've come, it's a very subtle but extremely powerful shift. And then all of a sudden we feel wealthy. We feel full of self-worth and self-value. And so this is a very key part of connecting with the self. And the last step I want to talk about, I just want to be mindful of the time here. This last step in terms of really addressing this loneliness is creating a habit of kindness. And kindness truly is connection. Not only kindness to others, kindness through random acts of kindness, and just kindness extends not just to bringing someone a cup of tea and leaving them a little love note. Those are wonderful. There's hundreds of ways, but kindness is also the way in which it's our whole demeanor, isn't it? It's the way in which we email people and address them. It's the way in which we sign off. It's the way in which we greet them when we see them. It's the way in which we say goodbye. It's the eye contact we make or don't make with people. It's the tone of voice and just the general disposition that we bring to the world is kindness. And of course, we go into the more typically understood definition of it, which is being helpful and being generous in your spirit and being offering where you can. Again, never at your own expense. Being kind at your own expense is not kindness. We only want to be kind when it benefits others, and then it benefits ourselves. It doesn't cost us anything, then it benefits both people. And my research, which I did for quite a while when I created the kindness journal, and I'll talk about that journal in a moment, was actually showed that through building and creating a habit of kindness in our life, and the way I defined it, we can actually influence our feelings of happiness, loneliness, contentment, and satisfaction in life by up to 50%. So this is a very simple but powerful thing. And I strongly encourage this habit of kindness so that it becomes natural and reflexive. And there are ways in which we can build a habit of changing that disposition. I also want to say very quickly that being kind is not being a pushover. Being kind is not being somebody's doormat. Never. Kindness can coexist with boundaries, healthy boundaries, saying no, not going to that because you just don't want to, and never having to explain yourself or justify yourself for any decision you make. That is still being a kind person. It's just the manner in which you approach these things. It's just the class and the dignity in which you approach yourself, the world, and your decisions that constitutes this idea of kindness and a kind approach. Okay, the time is 8:05. I want to make sure I leave lots of time for questions. So I'm going to stop my part of just speaking to you. And I also have one more short story I want to read before I end. So this slide, I said I'd talk about the journal. So I created this journal, which is in the middle of the lower half. And this is a journal where you could fill it in every day. It's a prompted guided journal. And it takes about 5 minutes to fill in every night. And it actually forces you to, it prompts you, not forces you, to write down certain things, wins of the day, things you might be grateful for, plans and ways in which you can be kind, and also helps you notice kindness in the day, pulling out any kind act from someone in the day. And you're meant to do this every night before you go to sleep. And if you do this consistently, this is how you can actually create that habit of kindness and bring that compassion that to promote and increase your social connections to others, but also connection to yourself. And there's a digital format that you can fill out online, and then there's physical format. And the thing at the top is something called the 8-Hour Therapist. Now, this is education only. It does not replace one-to-one counseling therapy or any kind of psychotherapy services, not at all. This is education on how you can actually take control of your own feelings of happiness, your emotional intelligence, your mental health and well-being. It is not meant to be a replacement or treatment, but it is a very valuable program of 9+ hours of video education, along with corresponding workbooks to help you learn how to take control of your own emotional fitness and your own emotional well-being. And I've put 2 codes here for this audience to be able to use if you want to purchase either one of these. One is at 50 off, and everything else is 20% off. And you can go to thekindnessjournal.com to learn more about those, and if you're interested in any one of those. So before I end, I just want to read one more lovely piece to you, because I love this one as well. And yeah, here it is. It's called A Reality. Ready or not, one day all the things we collected, whether treasures or baubles, will pass to someone else. There will be no more surprises, no minutes or hours or days. Our wealth, fame, and temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what we owned or what we owed. Our grudges, resentments, frustrations, jealousies will finally disappear. So too, our hopes, ambitions, plans, and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It won't matter where we came from or what side of the tracks we lived on at the end. It won't matter whether we were beautiful or brilliant. Even our gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of our days be measured? What will matter is not what we learned, but what we taught. Is not our successes, but our significances. Is not our competence, but our character. Is not how many people we knew, but how many people will feel a lasting loss when we are gone. Is not our memories, but the memories that live in those who loved us. Is not what we bought, but what we sacrificed. Is not what we got, but what we gave. Is every act of integrity, compassion, humility that enriched or encouraged others to emulate our example. Is the clarity and care at which we loved others and have been a positive influence in their lives. So on that, I'm going to stop my portion of speaking at you for this evening, and thank you very much for listening to my short presentation. And I'm very pleased to stick around and speak with all of you. And answer any questions or comments that you may have. So thank you very much. And I will stop sharing my screen, and Tina, turn it over to you.
The session has definitely been a revelation for me, and I'm sure our audience found it very enlightening and helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. I want to remind the audience about the raffle draw at the end of the webinar, so please stay connected until the end. Now, moving on to the Q&A part of the webinar, our expert, Dr. Sharma, today will answer the audience questions. I would like to request the audience to submit their questions now if you have not already done so. So we start off with the first question. First question is, how does one balance the need for love with being self-sufficient or being detached?
That's an interesting question. I hope that I understand it correctly. So the need for love, I'm going to make a distinction between need and drive. Okay, because we often say that we need certain things, but what we have is a very strong drive for it, psychological, biological drive for love. And that is definitely something that we have, most of us with very few exceptions, have a drive for love. And that means social connection, among other things, and sexual connection and physical connection and intimate connection. So I don't think that we can balance it with detachment, because I think they're two separate things. Perhaps the person who asked the question can elaborate, but detachment, I think, is a conscious choice that we make, or maybe unconscious choice that we make with respect to choosing to mentally remove ourselves from being connected to something. Whether that's a good decision or a healthy one or not is a different story, but I think that they're two separate things. And the drive for love, again, it doesn't have to be romantic love. This is sort of a misconception. Many of us will have that drive for romantic love, not just for procreation, of course, and for the companionship, but love is and relationships is many forms of that, friendships, children, parents, etc. So perhaps if the person who asked the question wants to elaborate a little bit more, I could be a little bit more helpful in that. And in the meantime, we could take maybe a different question.
One of the viewers says, thanks for explaining the 4 points to fight the loneliness. My question is, why one feels not connected or lonely even when he or she is sitting amongst the people she or he is connected to?
So I'm assuming you mean connected to, like, in a I don't want to say superficial, but the people who are like important figures in your life, like parents, children, spouses, friends, etc., relatives. So it goes back to that perception, right? You could be in a room full of your entire family and still feel lonely. You can still feel disconnected, because if you don't feel the quality, if you don't have a quality relationship with those people, or at least one of them, then you'll feel lonely in the room. I think every one of us has been there. I know I certainly have, been in a room where, usually a family event, but not always, but yeah, typically, because we don't have expectations to feel connected to people who aren't significant or that we think are supposed to be significant, right? We don't have an expectation in a room full of strangers to feel connected. So we're never going to feel lonely in a room full of strangers. It's just not going to happen. When we feel lonely is typically when we feel like the people in our lives who we're supposed to feel satisfied with, like spouses, children, relatives, again, all that, those key lists, the friendships, when we feel like we don't have people like that in our lives that we like and love and feel safe with and can be vulnerable with, again, those things being the basis of connection, that's when we feel lonely. So I think it's a matter of being in a room of people who might be in your life and might be significant players in your life, but you might want to think about why you feel. It's fine that you feel disconnected from them. It's okay if you don't have a quality connection with those kinds of people. I would be remiss to find anybody or someone who feels that way about all the significant players in their life. But think about what it is that you are lacking and why you perceive that relationship to be a lonely one, and what you want to do about it from your side. You know, do you want to take the steps to create a deeper connection with someone and hopefully they reciprocate? Or is it something that you kind of have to put your hands up and say, I don't think it's going to happen with these people. I'm expecting to be connected to them and it's not a realistic expectation. I'm going to move my attention and find people who I think I have a higher chance of feeling satisfied within a relationship.
The next one is grown-up children in Western society are self-centered and need their own space. Thus, elderly, especially singles, are left alone and not included in the family. And I see a majority of old women living on their own. What's your take on that?
I'm unaware of the statistic, but I do know that the two age groups that are the highest at risk for loneliness are the elderly, okay, and teenagers. And everyone, teenagers right there, just saying teenagers should be the quantity quality argument is right there. Teenagers are often surrounded by their peers. They're in school every day. They're huddled in groups, and they are some of the loneliest humans because this is a time when, you know, connection is forming and all of that, and approval of others and fitting in is so important. But yes, I think as we age, there are changes in who we are as humans and how we develop that increase our need for social connection and feeling those meaningful relationships. We have a much higher tolerance for superficial relationships when we're younger, even though fundamentally we still can recognize that we're lonely, hence the teens, but we have a much higher tolerance for it. Then as we get older, we realize this is really quite serious. And I think it's about 55. I don't want to quote a very specific age, but somewhere around the mid 50s to early 50s to mid 50s, where the quality of your friendships and connectedness is the highest predictor of all for your level of happiness. And yet we've moved so far away from facilitating this as a society. And I'm being very broad in general here. Not everybody is going to relate to this. Some people out there have fabulous friend groups and have been lucky to find communities and people who actually want to get together regularly, and they have that bond, but too many don't. And you're right. I don't think it's a question of being single. Again, it's not about being single or unmarried. You don't have to marry or be in a relationship to not feel lonely. You need to have quality people in your life, people who you feel satisfied with. And I think the reason that the elderly are at particular risk is because they stop, a lot of them aren't as involved in their community anymore. They just don't have the exposure as much to humans, to other people. I see that in my own family. There are two people in my family who are 75, 70 plus. One of them, and they're married, and one of them is really active in the community, you know, husband and wife. And she has friends, she speaks on the phone with them, and I don't think she struggles with loneliness, but I do worry about the other one because her husband is more, he's just less involved, and he just doesn't pick up the phone, and he just doesn't have those opportunities to interact with other people as much. So I do worry, and there are differences even at that level, but I don't think it's a question about being single. It's a question of opportunity and of the availability of connecting with other people.
Thank you. The next one is, how does one remain kind and empathetic on days when we are low on it? How do we draw on our inner reserves when times are challenging?
That's a great question. You do not have to be a Pollyanna every day, you know, and you don't have to be perfect. You can, you know, if you're experiencing significant levels of stress or distress that are ongoing, eventually you're going to have to take ownership of that and do something about it. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to be around you very much. Okay, we've all been there, have we not? Right? But if you have a bad moment, if you're just having a day where, the term I use is space or bandwidth. And we usually use that for computers and so forth, but it really applies to us mentally as well. If we are having our own problems or challenges, doesn't matter what level they are. They could be serious or they could be small. We don't owe it to ourselves or anyone to be the same person we were able to be a week ago or 6 months ago or 5 weeks from now. You are where you are, and you can give whatever you are able to give on that day based on whatever bandwidth you have. And that does change. We don't have the same bandwidth every day. And so what we are able to give, it fluctuates. You know, sometimes we won't be able to give much at all to others, and we have to focus on ourselves. Now, the other part of that is being able to receive. So a lot of us give, you know, especially parents, right? Who are raising really young children, their whole lives are centered around giving. It's very important to receive as well, because again, receiving, giving and receiving, it's a two-way thing, creating social connection, staving off loneliness. You can't be someone who just gives and gives. You have to receive love, kindness, empathy, compassion, caregiving. Let somebody bring you soup. You know, I don't know, I've known people who just don't, they're allergic to people even taking care of them, you know. Let people in. This is what creates these this social connectedness and bonding.
Thank you. Why do some people find it difficult to love themselves?
Another really, really good question. This, in all the years that I've been A, alive, and B, in this field of personal development and emotional fitness and emotional health, I have come to see that self-love is not natural or intuitive. And this is my opinion today. Maybe I'll have a different one in a year or 10 years, but this is my opinion today. I don't think self-love is intuitive. And that's strange to me because it's extraordinarily protective. Like, loving the self is protection of the self. So that, I think, is one of the things that makes it hard. First of all, it doesn't come naturally to us. Then on top of that, you add that we now live, especially today, in a society that reinforces. I mean, we talk about self-love now more than ever. We talk about self-care. We talk about how important it is. The messaging out there and the dialogue is greater than it's ever been before. You know, my children even hear about it a little bit in school. And of course, I talk about it with them. But the reality is that nobody really understands two things: how to put that into practice, self-love, and two, the environment isn't always, again, facilitating or conducive to us behaving in self-loving ways, being able to take vacation, being able to take paid time off, being able to focus on ourselves and our health and our relationships and our loved ones. So the first one, which we're very much in control of, is self-love, is difficult because it requires that we accept ourselves completely and wholly as we are, including any mistakes or things that we did, the people we pissed off 5 years ago, the transgressions we made last week, the ones we'll make, sure to be make for the rest of our lives. We have to be able to be okay with everything about ourselves and never want to change a single thing about your past, even those moments that were less than shining, because if you're happy with yourself in the present at every moment, if you accept and love yourself, which is the definition of self-value and self-love, if you are unconditionally accepting of yourself every moment of every day, then by de facto, you accept everything about your past and what brought you to that moment. And you wouldn't change anything about it, because if you did, not that you could, but if you did, you wouldn't be the person you are today. So it's hard to make sense of it if you can wrap your head around every moment, here and now, today, this moment, an hour from now, tomorrow. If you can maintain that same feeling about yourself, that no matter what anyone else thinks, no matter what, they may not accept you and everything that you do, but you can always do that for yourself. And it's a difficult thing to do, because it means we have to separate our behavior from the self and say, there are things that I have done and will do that I don't like and I wish to improve on. But the self, the person that I am, who I am, I will never change how I feel about that person and that self. That stays, that person I am in love with forever. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. So that was a very long answer. I apologize.
How to convince a depressed person to meet the psychologist or have the sessions to identify the cause of current circumstances, or to make him feel that it is okay. Together we will deal with it.
I don't think you can make anybody feel anything. And I know this because I believe that we create our feelings ourselves. And it's not just me who believes this. We know this, like from an evidence-based standpoint, we know how emotions are created. And by we, I'm not talking about a professional. I'm not a psychologist, and and there are people who work with people in therapy and counseling, and there are many people who wish that their loved ones would go and seek therapy and counseling with qualified professionals. But you can't force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. Number one. You can have influence, and you can, of course, if you're a trusted person in their life, your influence and your advice may carry a lot of weight. But at the end of the day, a person is largely, with few exceptions, we are all responsible for how we feel. And the way we create how we feel is how we process the events around us. It's the way we think about the world. It's the way we think about this event. I walked into this room and this group of people over here looked at me, then looked at each other and started laughing. Okay, what am I thinking right away? It's going to create the emotional response to that event. That's just a fact, right? These people looked and laughed. It happened. That's factual. How do I process that event is what creates the emotional response. So if I think to myself, if I process to myself, they probably just finished off a joke and they were laughing at the punchline and that's it. I probably feel just fine and happy and move along into the room, into the event. But if I processed it this way, that group of people just looked at me. They don't like what I'm wearing. I must have something on my egg on my face or whatever. They don't like me. I must look foolish. That's going to create a very different emotional response. Okay, you're going to feel anxious and worried and concerned and on edge. And that is, all of that is to say that we are the ones who are responsible for emotions. You can't make somebody feel depressed.
I think we'll take one last one before we sign off for tonight. How does a young adult work on building good self-esteem, overcome how they look and no one will love them kind of feeling?
Okay, so I will go back to the gap gain concept, which is how you measure yourself. When you are a young person starting out in your early adulthood, there's such a strong drive for approval. Whoever asked that question, if you're a young person, let me assure you that as you move along in life, your need for approval from others will go down and down. Now, not needing people's approval doesn't mean that we don't want it and enjoy it. Of course we do. It's nice to be approved of. Like, I'm giving a talk right now and some of you might like it and I will enjoy hearing that you like it, and some of you may not like it, and that's okay too. The second part is crucial. I don't need the approval. I'd like it, and if it comes, it's wonderful, but I don't need it or require it in order to, as a measure of my own self-worth, okay? So if this person who asked the question, and to everyone listening, can focus on this concept that it's okay to desire the approval of others, it's not healthy to require it for your own self-worth. You need to understand who you are, what you value, and those things will change, right? There are different seasons in life. Who you are and what you value today might not be who you are and what you value in 10 years, 15 years. We do change, we evolve. And be that person and lean into that person and bring more of whoever you are to the world, fully accepting of that person and the successes, the wins, the highs, the lows. Let the world respond to you as they will. Some people are going to like you, some people aren't. Some people are going to approve of you, some people aren't. Focus on the ones that do approve and like, and just move along from the others. We don't like everybody, so why should everybody like us? You know, the logic is quite clear. And again, treat yourself, if you can really make a mental shift that you were born worthy as it is, without ever having done a single thing as a newborn. You were already born worthy, just as worthy as everyone else. If you can really, it's kind of an aha moment, but if you can really understand that and make that shift, everything becomes easier afterwards, because once you hold yourself in the highest regard and value yourself, you will take care of that self like nobody's business. You know, like when we value something, I value my children, right? We all value our children. We take care of them. We kiss them, we love them, we hug them, we feed them good food, we tickle them, we spend time with them. We take care of these little humans because we value them so, so much. We have to do the same for ourselves. The moment you value something, someone, you will love it, tickle it, feed it good food, exercise it, nurture it, give it good sleep at night. Go see a counselor or therapist if that's going to help you. You will go to your doctor. You will take your medication if you need to. You will do everything you possibly can to protect and preserve that thing, you, because you value it. So.
That was excellent. Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for your insightful answers. And thank you so much, audience, for your participations. I know the questions are coming fast and quickly, but unfortunately, that's all we have time for tonight. So I would like to thank you all once again. The raffle draw is coming up shortly, so kindly stay connected. I would now like to invite Smita Chandra, the chair of the Women's Outreach Wing Committee, to say a few words in closing. Smita should be with us momentarily.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Tina. And thank you so much, Dr. Natasha, for totally blowing us away today by your webinar. I could easily add a couple more hours to your talk and just listen fascinated. It was illuminating, it was knowledgeable, it was fascinating. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your insights about the epidemic of loneliness. A very special thank you to Dr. Devanation for his special stories. He always inspires us by his meaningful stories, and we appreciate them so much. None of this would have been possible without the hard work and passion of the executive committee. And I would like to thank Dr. Asha Devanation, Tina Walia, Ashima Jain, Sridhar Rao, Dr. Sudhi, Rajiv Prasad, and Sanjeev Chandra for all their hard work in bringing this webinar to you today and in the past as well. This is our 5th webinar for the year, and we're very interested in your feedback. So if you could let us know what you think of all the topics that we have covered so far, as well as what you would like us to address in the future, we would really appreciate that. We would also really appreciate your answers to this simple poll that is going to come up on your screen. Just a couple of questions we would love your feedback on. And if you could answer, give us your feedback by going to our website at trivo.org and clicking on contact us and giving us your feedback about what you want to see, what you think of what we've done so far, how are we doing, that would be incredibly helpful. A very special thank you to our charming host, Tina Walia, who has kept us riveted to our screens today. Thank you so much, Tina. Tina will be coming up very soon with the raffles, so please stick around right till the end. And who knows, you might be the winner as well. Our next webinar is going to be on January 19th. This one is not to be missed. It is all about COVID. Our very eminent speaker, Dr. Peter Lin, is going to be in conversation with Dr. Devanation, and they're going to discuss the pandemic and offer us insights and updates. So if you're interested in where COVID is going to be next year, how life is going to be next year with COVID, please join in. And watch out for my flyer in my email, which I will be sending out to everyone, and register right away. So I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar and all the previous webinars that have followed, that have preceded today. Have a wonderful evening and stick around for Tina to please pick out the raffle winners. Good luck and good night.
Thank you very much, Smita, for those kind words. And now it is raffle time. So I'm really delighted to announce the winners tonight, and they are Fleming Vigas, Umang Kachru, and Shruti Mishra. I'd like to mention that the e-gift cards will be emailed to the winners on the email addresses provided at the time of webinar registration within the next 2 weeks. On behalf of the Women's Outreach Wing of the Ripple Effect Wellness Organization, I would like to thank you all for attending the webinar tonight. If you could please take a few minutes to fill out the poll, we would really appreciate that. Thank you for participating in our webinars in 2021. We sincerely hope that it was as beneficial to you as it was to us in bringing them to you. Please stay safe, healthy, and happy. See you at our next webinar in the new year on January 19th. Season's greetings to you all and wishing our American audience happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.